All right, everybody, day 2 of solving rational equations. Today you'll go probably as quick as yesterday did. Again, you've gotten really good at solving equations. Now we're just going to throw in some new kinds of numbers. We're throwing in rational numbers. We're throwing in things like 2/6, this number right here. We're also going to be throwing in some decimals, which we haven't done in equations yet, and we just want to practice that a little bit. So we're going to follow the same steps that we followed when we did this with integers. Most of these are going to involve multiplying and dividing, and so we're going to be multiplying or dividing to get rid of them. That'll be our inverse operation today. So step 1, at this point, hopefully, you've already written this down. There's railroad tracks, and we need to draw them on each side of the equal sign. Okay, that's kind of our first step, and it has been for a while now with these equations, just to remind us, whatever we do on this side, we have to do on that side to keep it equal. Step 2, we're going to circle the variable and anything attached to it. And I don't want you to forget the sign. Okay, because sometimes, especially with these fractions, we get so caught up worrying about the fraction and the decimal that we forget about the sign out in front. So I'm going to circle my variable, which is x. And right now, attached to it is this fraction, 2/6. That's attached to the front of x. There's no sign, which means this is a positive. So let's move on to step 3. We want to get the variable by itself. We want to get the variable by itself using inverse or opposite operations. And we need to remember to do it to both sides. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways to do this, because inverse operations, when we're multiplying and dividing, there's some shortcuts that we can do. Right now, x is being multiplied by 2/6. So the opposite of multiplying by 2/6 is just to divide by 2/6, which I can do. I can divide both sides of this by 2/6 and get the answer that I'm looking for. In fact, let's just work this all the way through the way that it is right now. On this side, those go away, and so I'm left with x equaling, I've got a -12, and I need to divide that by 2/6. Okay, so remember, 2/6 is being multiplied, the inverse is division. So I need to divide by 2/6, and I get a -36. And I know that confuses some of you, that we're dividing by a fraction, but our number's getting bigger. And if you go back to 6th grade, if you go back to doing operations with fractions, if I had given you something like 1/3 divided by 1/2, when we divide by fractions, the easiest way to do it is to actually, it's to actually kind of change the problem. What we do is we have our 1/3, and instead of dividing, we're going to multiply. But we're going to multiply by the reciprocal of 1/2. We're going to flip that over to 2/1. Because multiplication with fractions is really easy. I just go across the top and the bottom. 1 times 2 is 2. 3 times 1 is 3. So 1/3 divided by 1/2 is just 2/3. Again, it got bigger because we broke it up into fraction-sized pieces. So we can do the same thing on these. Instead of dividing by 2/6, I could multiply by the reciprocal. So if I rewrote this problem, if I rewrote 2/6 x equals -12, and this is something that, again, either way is going to get you to the right answer, but going into middle school, multiplying by the reciprocal might help you a little bit more if you start getting in that habit now. Right now, I'm multiplying 2/6 by x, and the inverse of that is to divide by 2/6. But fractions, again, we don't like division. This is a hard thing to do when we're dividing with decimals and fractions. So instead of dividing by a fraction, we can multiply by the reciprocal of that fraction. So yes, I want to divide by 2/6, but the way I'm going to do that is by actually multiplying by 6/2. And if I do it to this side, I have to do it to this side. So I'm left over with an x over here, and on this side, if I do -12, and I multiply that by 6/2, I end up with the same answer, -36. I don't care which way you do it. Today we're going to practice kind of doing both of them. As long as you can get to -36, I'm happy with that. If you're comfortable multiplying by the reciprocal to get rid of this instead of dividing, it's going to help you out a lot next year. It's just going to give you kind of a shortcut into some of the stuff you're doing next year. If you're not comfortable with it and you would rather just divide by the fraction, keep doing it that way. I'm going to leave that kind of up to you guys. Our last step here is to check our solution, which we probably should have done. We're talking like we're done, like we're finished, like yes, we know it's negative 36, but let's plug that back into this first equation. And I'm going to, just to kind of save us some time on the video, I'm just going to plug that right into my calculator. 26 times x. So 26 times, I think x is a negative 36. So I plug that in and I get negative 12, which is what I wanted. So I'm pretty confident in that answer. And let's just move on. Let's try a couple of these and we'll just kind of see how things go. Now I've got my railroad tracks. For number one, I have x over 3.6 equals negative 96. So I draw my railroad tracks, I circle my variable and everything attached to it. Again, this doesn't make a big difference on single step, but tomorrow that's going to be really important. So we're going to keep doing it. We're going to stay in that habit. X is being divided by 3.6. That's what this little bar means. So instead of dividing, I'm going to multiply by 3.6 to make that go away. And my other side, I need to multiply by 3.6. So I get negative 96 multiplied by 3.6. And I get a negative 345.6. So I think that x is equal to a negative 345.6. So let's check that. Again, I'm going to save us some time on the video, and I'm just going to type it in. X goes on top, so negative 345.6, and that's the top of my fraction, and I've got 3.6 on the bottom. When I hit enter, I get negative 96. So I feel good about that answer. All right, number two. Railroad tracks. I've got negative 1.6 times t minus a 4.8. So I'm going to circle this because it's my variable and the numbers in front attached to it and the sign in front that's attached to it all kind of goes together. So the opposite of multiplying by a negative 1.6 is to divide by, whoops, I almost forgot my negative. We need to divide by a negative 1.6. And on this side, I need to divide by a negative 1.6. So over here, I'm left with t, because those go away. And then on this side, negative 4.8 divided by negative 1.6 is going to end up being a positive 3. A negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 1.6 goes into 4.8 3 times. If you don't believe me, let's double check. And we're right, we've got 3. So we think that the answer is 3. I'm going to plug that in and double check. I've got negative 1.6 times t, so times what I think t is, 3, and I get negative 4.8. So we feel good about that answer. All right, last problem. We'll get you done and out of here in less than 10 minutes. Again, we're solving equations one step. So I'm going to draw my railroad tracks. I'm going to circle my variable and the 3/4 that's in front of it. And I need to get rid of 3/4. Right now it's being multiplied by g. So I should divide by 3/4. I don't like dividing by fractions. If you do, go for it. But I don't like doing it. It's kind of messy. So instead, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of 3/4, which is 4/3. And I'm going to multiply this side by 4/3. And that's going to make this 3/4 go away. If you don't remember that, so if I have 3/4 and I multiply that by 4/3, which is what I'm doing, 3 times 4 is 12. 4 times 3 is also 12. So this just becomes 1. So instead of 3/4 g, I'm changing it to just 1g, which is what I want. So times by 4/3 times by 4/3, those go away. I'm left with my 1g. And on this side, I've got a negative 12, and I'm multiplying that by 4/3, which tells me I should get a negative 16. I think that g is negative 16. So let's just plug that back into the calculator. 3/4 times g, so we can check our answer. So 3/4. I'm going to multiply that by what I think g is. I'm just taking this number, this part of the equation, and I'm plugging in my answer. So 3/4 times negative 16. I hit enter, and I get negative 12, which is what I wanted to get. So I can box this in. I can feel good about my math, turn it in, feel like I did good things. So these 3 problems at the bottom, give them a try on your own. On this one, you're dividing by a decimal, not a big deal. Multiplying by a decimal, not a big deal. When you get down here where you need to make that choice to either multiply by the reciprocal or divide, again, that's up to you. If you want to flip it over and multiply, go for it. I think that's the easiest way because it saves us an extra step. If you just want to divide and plug it in the calculator, you're welcome to do it that way as well. So do the best you can. Let me see your work when you're done. We'll see how you're understanding, and we'll go from there. Good luck.